everyone sort of says, oh, well, Harry did talk about Andrew and Spare. Honestly, it was one paragraph. And it was one paragraph, Tash, that was only included because Harry was trying to...
That was not very myself.
At the time, there was no indication to me or anybody else that that was what he was doing.
Harry wrote an entire book and presented it as the complete truth, a deeply personal account that was supposed to expose everything behind palace walls. According to reports, the book caused shockwaves throughout royal circles. Commentators, insiders, and critics all talked about how revealing it was. But when it came to Prince Andrew, one of the most controversial figures connected to the royal family, and someone whose public scandals have brought intense scrutiny to the monarchy, Harry had very little to say. In fact, it was just a single paragraph. And even that brief mention was focused mainly on Harry's own security concerns rather than Andrew's controversies.
How do you explain that?
I can't. Because I have absolutely no memory of that photograph ever being taken.
Do you recognise yourself in the photo?
Yeah, it's really difficult not to recognise.
There was no detailed discussion of the wider allegations, no deep dive into institutional decisions, and no major examination of the issues that had dominated headlines for years. Instead, the focus quickly returned to Harry himself. That contrast stands out. Harry openly discussed personal family tensions, described disagreements with his brother in great detail, reflected on his father's shortcomings as a parent, and even shared highly private parts of his own life. He showed little hesitation when discussing many sensitive subjects. Yet, when the conversation could have turned toward one of the most damaging controversies associated with the royal family, his approach suddenly became far more limited and restrained.
Moan about why he had his security taken away and Andrew didn't. It wasn't anything actually about wanting to expose Andrew. The Yorks have always been protected by Harry and Meghan.
So the question remains, why? That question continues to spark debate among royal watchers and critics alike. And for many observers, the lack of attention given to Andrew has become one of the most talked about omissions in Harry's story. Because what many people are increasingly noticing is that Harry and Meghan did not just speak less about Andrew, they largely avoided making him a central topic at all. Some critics and royal commentators have argued that Harry and Meghan went beyond simply staying silent about Andrew and Sarah Ferguson, often known as Fergie. According to those observers, they avoided drawing attention to issues surrounding the York family at a time when public scrutiny was already growing. Now, claims from royal investigators and media figures are fueling fresh speculation that old connections, private conversations, and long-hidden tensions could resurface in unexpected ways.
They know a lot about how Prince Harry and Meghan Markle behaved during their time in the British royal family. Because even though Harry and Meghan are now trying to distance themselves from the Yorks,
one of the biggest talking points involves reports that members of the York Circle may have knowledge of private discussions involving Harry and Meghan. These claims remain the subject of debate, but they continue to attract attention because of suggestions that personal stories, confidential exchanges, and behind-the-scenes details could someday be made public. Fergie has occasionally spoken about writing and publishing projects over the years, and that possibility has only added more curiosity about what might eventually be revealed. If that happens, the fallout would not be limited to Prince Andrew's public controversies alone. For some royal watchers, the situation has grown into a much larger story involving relationships, loyalties, and decisions made behind closed doors. It places renewed focus on Harry's role, raising questions about what he chose to discuss publicly and what he chose to leave out. As more details emerge, those questions are becoming harder for commentators to ignore. The debate also extends to Meghan, with some observers examining her connections, professional relationships, and public associations. Supporters and critics alike continue to analyse why certain topics received extensive attention while others remained largely untouched.
they were closest to the Yorks out of anyone because they loved going around to the Yorks and being able to bitch about William and Catherine and sort of act as if they were like on the outer of the family together.
That discussion has become a major part of the broader royal narrative. And there is one point that keeps coming up again and again. Many commentators believe the omission of Andrew from Spare was not accidental. A book of that scale goes through extensive editing, legal review, and careful planning. Because of that, every major inclusion and every major exclusion can appear intentional. For critics, the limited attention given to Andrew has become one of the most debated choices in the entire book, and a question that continues to follow Harry long after publication. To understand why some commentators believe Harry now faces difficult questions, it is important to look at the reported relationship between the Sussexes and the Yorks. According to various royal observers, this was not simply a distant family connection that surfaced during major royal gatherings. It has often been described as a much closer relationship, one built on shared experiences, regular contact, and a sense of understanding that developed over many years. Many royal analysts have argued that both families sometimes felt disconnected from the core power structure of the monarchy.
A $20 million advance, like Harry received, is what she wants. And the people who are most terrified about this are Prince Harry and Meghan Markle.
Harry and Meghan have publicly spoken about feeling isolated and struggling within royal life. They described an environment where they felt overshadowed and compared to other senior royals. Whether those perceptions were fully accurate or not remains a matter of debate, but they became a major part of the Sussex narrative. Supporters of this theory say the Yorks could relate to those frustrations. Andrew and Fergie spent years dealing with their own challenges within the royal system, often facing periods of public criticism and questions about their role inside the institution. Because of those similarities, some observers believe the two households developed a stronger bond than many people realised. One detail repeatedly highlighted by royal commentators is how close the Sussexes were said to be with Fergie. To those watching these relationships unfold, that is not a minor footnote, it is a significant piece of the puzzle. Fergie has long been connected to multiple generations of the royal family, giving her a unique perspective on private family dynamics and major events behind palace doors. According to reports and commentary, she was present during important moments, family gatherings, and private conversations as major decisions were being considered.
Because it is Fergie, of course, who could reveal all about what really went on with this couple and the British royal family and Andrew behind the scenes.
She is often described as someone who heard concerns, frustrations, and personal accounts before they were later presented through interviews, documentaries, books, or public statements. If those accounts are accurate, the trust flowed both ways, creating a relationship that went far beyond simple family courtesy and making it a connection that continues to attract attention today. According to some royal commentators, the relationship between the Sussexes and the Yorks may have involved a level of trust that benefited both sides. The theory often put forward is that each household was aware of private family matters that were never intended for public discussion. Whether that characterization is accurate remains open to debate, but it has become a major topic among those who closely follow royal affairs. For years, critics have pointed to Harry's brief mention of Andrew and Spare as evidence of a deliberate decision to avoid exploring a highly controversial subject in any meaningful detail. Now, with renewed scrutiny surrounding Andrew and increasing speculation about future revelations from people connected to the royal family,
they say an injured animal is its most dangerous, and Fergie may well be feeling like that. It will be the final death blow. She will destroy any chances of her daughters.
Some observers are questioning whether that long-standing balance can continue. If new accounts, memoirs, interviews, or personal recollections emerge, attention could shift toward relationships and conversations that have largely remained out of public view. There is also an irony that many critics have highlighted. Harry has often presented himself as someone willing to challenge royal traditions of secrecy and speak openly about difficult subjects. Through interviews, documentaries, and his memoir, he argued that telling uncomfortable truths was sometimes more important than protecting institutions or preserving family unity. That message became a central part of his public image. However, critics argue that the Andrew controversy remains one of the biggest exceptions to that approach. They point out that while Harry discussed many sensitive family matters, he largely avoided one of the most publicly debated scandals connected to the monarchy. For those critics, That omission raises questions about where the line between transparency and personal loyalty was actually drawn. Some commentators have gone even further, suggesting that if a memoir from someone with close knowledge of royal family dynamics were ever published, the impact could extend well beyond the senior royals most commonly discussed in the media. Names across multiple branches of the family could find themselves pulled back into old controversies and unresolved disputes. Those claims remain speculative, but they continue to generate intense interest. And that is why the possibility of future revelations attracts so much attention. People who were present during key moments, family gatherings, private discussions, and periods of major change may possess perspectives that have never been fully shared with the public. Whether any of those stories ever emerge remains unknown, but the possibility alone is enough to keep royal watchers talking and asking difficult questions. At 66, Fergie finds herself at a very different stage of life than when she was one of the most recognizable figures connected to the royal family. Many royal commentators argue that her relationship with the institution has changed dramatically over the years. Her official royal role ended long ago, and critics of the monarchy often point to what they see as a growing focus on the future reign of Prince William rather than preserving older family arrangements. As a result, some observers believe that long-time royal figures have increasingly found themselves pushed to the sidelines. According to author and royal investigator Andrew Loney, Fergie may be motivated by a desire to tell her side of events after years of public criticism and exclusion. That assessment has fueled speculation about the possibility of future publishing projects. If a major memoir were ever released, many believe it would need to contain significant new information to attract the kind of attention and financial backing that large publishers reserve for headline-making books.
If they can come out of this, so it's whether she will risk that, whether she will risk her daughter's relationships as well.
In today's publishing world, a high-profile memoir is expected to offer more than familiar stories. Readers look for fresh details, personal perspectives, and accounts that challenge or expand upon narratives already in the public domain. Because of her decades-long connection to royal circles, Fergie is often viewed as someone who could potentially provide unique insights into major events and relationships that shaped modern royal history. One reason this possibility generates so much discussion is her reported proximity to Harry and Meghan during pivotal years. Royal watchers have frequently noted that she was part of social gatherings, family events, and private conversations during periods when tensions within the royal family were becoming increasingly visible. If she possesses first-hand knowledge of those moments, some commentators believe publishers would view that material as highly valuable. What makes the speculation even more dramatic is the idea that private conversations can sometimes differ from carefully prepared public statements. Critics and supporters alike understand that public interviews, books, and media appearances often go through extensive review processes. A memoir claiming to reveal earlier, unfiltered discussions would immediately attract enormous attention, whether readers agreed with its conclusions or not. For many analysts, the bigger story is not simply about a potential book. It is about a person who may feel overlooked after decades of trying to maintain a connection to a world that has steadily evolved around her. That sense of frustration, combined with years of personal experience, is why rumors about what she might say continue to spark such intense interest and debate. For many commentators, the question of whether Fergie writes a memoir is about more than money alone. Publishing deals can certainly be lucrative, but personal motivations often play an equally important role. People who feel overlooked, criticized, or unfairly treated sometimes become more willing to share their side of the story, especially when they believe they have been denied a voice for years. That possibility is one reason speculation around a potential memoir continues to grow. According to reports discussed by royal author Andrew Loney, Fergie has already explored book-related projects and may be working with professional writers. If those reports are accurate, then the conversation is no longer about a purely hypothetical publication. Instead, attention shifts to what details might be included, when they could emerge, and how much supporting information could accompany any major claims. This is where some royal observers believe the situation becomes especially sensitive for Harry and Meghan. public figures can often respond to media criticism, anonymous sources, or outside speculation. A first-hand account from someone who spent considerable time around them would be a different challenge entirely. Whether readers would accept such an account is another question, but it would undoubtedly attract major attention and spark intense public debate. Another topic that frequently surfaces in discussions about the Sussexes involves Meghan's professional and social connections before joining the royal family. Commentators have long debated who she knew, how certain introductions were made, and which social circles she moved through during different stages of her career. Much of this information is already publicly available, yet opinions differ sharply on how significant those connections actually are. Supporters argue that many public figures build wide-ranging networks throughout their careers, and that such relationships should not automatically be treated as controversial.
I think the line is that they will create firewalls around Charles, and the line will be he never knew, and some poor flunky will take the blame. But we do know that he was involved in the settlement. All my sources say he contributed money. He would certainly have discussed it with other senior members of the royal family. And so he's in quite a difficult position, I think.
Critics, meanwhile, sometimes question whether certain connections have received less scrutiny than they might have if they involved other high-profile individuals. That disagreement remains an ongoing part of the broader media debate surrounding Meghan. Why does this matter in discussions about Prince Andrew? Because one of the lasting lessons from the Andrew controversy is that associations, relationships, and social networks often become subjects of public examination when larger scandals emerge. Over the years, questions have frequently been raised about who knew whom, how close those relationships were, and what significance they may or may not have carried. Those debates continue today, reminding observers that public interest often extends beyond individual actions and into the wider circles surrounding them. For many observers, the release of information connected to the Epstein controversy fundamentally changed how the public views influential networks and personal associations. Questions that may once have been dismissed as irrelevant are now often examined far more closely. As a result, commentators increasingly argue that public figures connected to powerful social circles can expect greater scrutiny than in previous decades. Some critics have also pointed to what they view as uneven media attention. They note that certain royal stories received intense, non-stop coverage, while other topics involving different public figures generated far less discussion. Whether that reflects editorial judgment, differences in available evidence, audience interest, or other factors remains heavily debated. Still, the perception of inconsistent scrutiny has become a story in its own right. Supporters of this argument often cite publicly available information, such as photographs, social appearances, professional relationships, and documented connections that have existed in plain sight for years. They question why some of those details have received limited examination compared with similar connections involving other high-profile individuals. Critics of that view, however, argue that the existence of a connection alone does not automatically indicate wrongdoing or deeper significance. That distinction remains important. What many people agree on is that the Andrew controversy reshaped public expectations. One of the major lessons drawn from that saga is that a lack of media attention does not necessarily determine how important a story may eventually become. Issues that appear minor at one point can later receive substantial scrutiny as new information emerges and public interest evolves. Because of that shift, some royal watchers believe future books, memoirs, or personal accounts could draw renewed attention to relationships and associations that have not previously been discussed in great depth. If individuals with first-hand knowledge choose to share their experiences, those accounts could become major topics of public conversation and media analysis. More broadly, the controversy has fueled debate about how institutions, celebrities, politicians, and public figures manage reputational challenges. Questions about influence, access, public relations strategies, legal responses, and media relationships have become central themes in discussions surrounding many high-profile scandals. The Andrew case, in particular, has intensified those conversations and left many observers asking whether similar standards of scrutiny are being applied consistently across the board. One of the biggest lessons many commentators draw from major public scandals is that reputational protection rarely lasts forever. Whether the protection comes from institutions, powerful allies, media relationships, or carefully managed public narratives, critics argue that those systems can weaken over time when faced with growing scrutiny and new information. History has shown that stories once considered settled can suddenly return to the spotlight in dramatic fashion. Because of that, some observers are now asking broader questions about public figures, their networks, and the people who may have helped shape or defend their public image.
So I think probably it was different several years ago, where I couldn't be as vocal and I had renewed pantyhose all the time.
These discussions often extend beyond any single individual and touch on larger issues involving influence, access, and how narratives are managed in high-profile circles. The debate surrounding Meghan Markle's associations has become part of that wider conversation, with supporters and critics offering very different interpretations of the same facts. At the centre of the speculation is the possibility that people with first-hand knowledge of key events could eventually share their own versions of what happened. For royal watchers, that is what makes the prospect of a memoir or insider account so fascinating. Such a book would not simply revisit familiar headlines, it could potentially challenge long-established narratives and introduce new perspectives that have never been publicly discussed. Much of the attention surrounding Fergie stems from the belief that she spent years in close proximity to major figures during pivotal moments in modern royal history. If she were to write extensively about those experiences, many commentators believe she could provide details about private conversations, family tensions, and personal relationships that remain largely unknown to the public. Whether those accounts would be accepted as definitive is another matter entirely, but they would almost certainly generate enormous interest. For Harry, some critics argue that the stakes are especially high because so much of his public image has been built around openness and speaking candidly about royal life. Through spare, high-profile interviews and documentary projects, he presented himself as someone willing to discuss subjects that others preferred to avoid. That reputation became a central part of his public identity. As renewed attention falls on past royal controversies, commentators are increasingly revisiting what was discussed publicly and what was left unsaid. Questions about knowledge, loyalty, personal judgment, and selective disclosure continue to fuel debate. For critics, each new development adds another layer to those discussions and prompts fresh examination of decisions made during some of the most turbulent years in recent royal history. According to many royal commentators, one reason the possibility of a Fergie memoir attracts so much attention is her reported proximity to key figures during some of the royal family's most turbulent years. If she was present for important discussions, private disagreements, and major turning points, she could potentially offer perspectives that differ from the accounts already presented through interviews, documentaries, and memoirs. That possibility alone is enough to keep speculation running at full speed. From the viewpoint of some analysts, the dynamics that once appeared stable may now be shifting. Relationships that were built on trust, shared experiences, or common interests can change dramatically when public pressure intensifies. As controversies evolve, and personal priorities change, individuals often become more focused on protecting their own reputations and futures. That reality has fueled growing discussion about whether old alliances remain as strong as they once seemed. For Harry, critics argue that this creates a particularly complicated situation. If new accounts emerge from people with first-hand knowledge of events, they could introduce information or interpretations that he has little ability to anticipate. Public debate would likely move beyond official statements and into competing personal narratives, making it much harder for any single version of events to dominate the conversation. Some observers believe this leaves few easy options. Remaining silent can invite questions, while responding publicly can generate even more attention.
That felt a little bit inauthentic, but that's a silly example. But it is an example of when you're able to dress the way you want to dress and you're able to say the things that are true.
Distancing oneself from former allies may also prove difficult when years of documented interactions and public associations already exist. In situations like this, every move can create new headlines and fresh scrutiny. That is why many royal watchers view the current moment as more than just another chapter in the Andrew story. They see it as part of a much broader examination of relationships, loyalties, and decisions made behind the scenes over many years. As new developments emerge, the focus may not remain confined to a single individual or controversy. A recurring argument from investigative writers and royal commentators is that once a major scandal begins unraveling, public attention rarely stays within carefully defined boundaries. Questions tend to expand outward, drawing in related events, associated figures, and long-standing narratives that were previously left unexplored. Whether that ultimately happens here remains uncertain, but it is one reason interest in the story continues to grow and why so many people are watching closely for what comes next. As major controversies unfold, public attention often expands beyond the central figures involved. Journalists, investigators, commentators, and the public frequently begin examining wider networks, past relationships, and decisions made behind closed doors. Questions naturally follow. Who knew what? Who spoke up? Who remained silent? And were important issues addressed when they first emerged? Those are the kinds of questions that tend to gain momentum as a story grows larger and more complex. Critics of Harry often point to the fact that he was a working member of the royal family during years when controversies surrounding Prince Andrew were developing. They also note that Spare, despite covering many sensitive topics, devoted very little attention to one of the most debated scandals connected to the monarchy. For those critics, that omission remains a subject of ongoing discussion and scrutiny. Meanwhile, Prince William is frequently portrayed by royal commentators as having taken a different approach. Reports over the years have suggested that he favoured dealing with difficult issues more directly and was concerned about the long-term impact certain controversies could have on the monarchy's reputation. Whether every report is accurate or not, many analysts believe William has increasingly focused on protecting the institution's future rather than preserving older arrangements. As heir to the throne, William faces the challenge of preparing for a very different royal era. Supporters often argue that his vision emphasises accountability, modernisation, and a more streamlined monarchy. In their view, recent scandals have reinforced the importance of those goals and highlighted the risks of allowing unresolved controversies to linger for years. Catherine is also frequently cited as an example of stability within the royal family. Royal watchers often praise her commitment to charitable causes, public service, and family life. Her supporters point to her long-term focus on projects involving early childhood development, mental health awareness, and community engagement as evidence of a steady and disciplined approach to public duty. For many commentators, the contrast they see between different royal figures.
I have always, ever since this has happened, and since this has become, as it were, public knowledge that I was there, I've questioned myself as to why did I go, what was I doing, and was it the right thing to do?
Ultimately comes down to choices, priorities, and public conduct over time. Some members of the family have become associated with controversy and ongoing debate, while others have cultivated reputations built around consistency and service. Whether one agrees with those assessments or not, they have become a major part of the narrative shaping public discussion about the monarchy's future and the lessons being drawn from its most difficult chapters. Charles bent to the manipulation of Fergie. That striking assessment, attributed to royal commentary and reporting on the family's internal dynamics, has become a powerful talking point among critics of how certain situations were handled over the years. Those commentators argue that Charles often preferred compromise and maintaining relationships rather than taking decisive action when conflicts emerged. Whether that approach reflected loyalty, caution, or a desire to avoid further division remains a matter of debate. But the criticism has persisted for years. Some royal observers draw a direct connection between that criticism and Harry's own choices. They point out that Spare was presented as a deeply revealing account of royal life, yet one of the monarchy's most controversial and widely discussed scandals received very limited attention. For critics, That contrast continues to raise questions about what was included, what was omitted, and why certain subjects were treated differently from others. Now, as fresh speculation surrounds potential memoirs, insider accounts, and new revelations, those questions are returning with renewed force. If people who were once trusted allies decide to tell their own stories, the public could be presented with additional perspectives that challenge or complicate existing narratives. Whether those accounts ultimately change public opinion is impossible to know, but they would undoubtedly generate enormous interest and debate. And that leads to the central question many commentators are asking today.
Another guest was John Botman, the literary agent. Now, he described seeing you there getting a foot massage from a young Russian woman. Did that happen?
No.
You're absolutely sure, or you can't remember?
Absolutely sure.
She was a 17-year-old girl meeting a senior member of the royal family.
It never happened.
She provided a photo of the
Yes.
two of you together.
Yes.
Your arm was around her waist.
Yes.
Harry has long argued that his decisions about what to discuss publicly were guided by principle and personal judgment. Critics, however, continue to wonder where the line between principle and strategy was drawn. If new voices enter the conversation and old alliances begin to shift, how will that affect the story that has been told over the past several years? That is the question royal watchers will be following closely. If Fergie does move forward with that book, and if she ultimately decides that telling her version of events is more important than protecting old relationships, the impact could be enormous. A memoir packed with first-hand experiences, private conversations, and behind-the-scenes perspectives would instantly become one of the most talked-about royal stories in years. The big question is whether Harry and Meghan's public narrative would emerge unchanged, or whether new details could reshape how many people view the story. What do you think? If Fergie releases a tell-all book, do Harry and Meghan's carefully crafted version of events survive the fallout, or could it change the conversation completely? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd genuinely love to hear your take on it. And if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Also, comment below if you made it all the way to the end, and share this video with anyone following the latest royal drama. Thanks so much for watching and for being part of the conversation.